Hello and welcome to the Mission TV show. Today we've got a wonderful family here all the way from Africa. Gary and Wendy and Cherise Roberts. Welcome to Tennessee.
Thank you.
You miss Africa?
We miss the heat.
You miss the heat.
For a short while.
And how long have you been in Africa? How many years?
We've been there just a little more than 5 years now.
Okay. And what are you doing there? What's your purpose and ministry?
Well, we have projects in several different countries, but our main project right now is in the country of Chad, which is right in the middle of Africa. It's a desert country. We like to say that we have the world's largest beach. It's the Sahara Desert. Unfortunately, we don't have the water to go with it, so it can be very hot at times.
That's on the other side of the beach, of the sand is the.
That's right. If you go 2,000 miles, then you get to the water.
So it's very dry there.
Very dry most of the time.
And hot.
And hot. It can be up to about 120 degrees. 110 is fairly common.
Is it dry?
Part of the year it's dry heat, and part of the year it's humid heat.
Wow.
So we have both.
Okay. And I hear that the Sahara Desert is kind of like advancing.
You know, if you look at pictures from like the 1950s and stuff, I met up with a geologist a while back, and he showed me pictures of Lake Chad. There's a small lake in Chad, and Lake Chad is about the quarter of the size that it was in the 1950s.
Wow.
So you can see from those pictures that it is definitely progressing a bit.
Wow. How close are you to the Sahara Desert and the sand dunes?
We're about 200 miles south of what I would call to be the differentiation between scrub brush and desert.
Okay. And what do you actually do in this? What's the name of the ministry that you're?
In Chad, we're Africa Medical Aviation.
Okay.
And we kind of have three main focuses. One, of course, is the aviation, doing the medical work into remote villages and so on. Also, right where we live, we have a nutrition center. We also transport medical personnel to and from a small hospital there. We also have construction projects for one-day churches, trying to advance the gospel into the unentered areas. Okay. So we use the medical work as the first line of the work, and then we follow with trying to get by workers trained and that kind of thing to advance the gospel. And then we also have some education work that we do.
So I've heard from a number of different people here in the States that Jesus is coming soon, and the work of the gospel going to the whole world is almost done. What's your perspective? Wendy, you're smiling.
I guess if you've been living under a rock and have heard that, I guess it's an easy life. But reality is that most of the world does not know, and that in some ways it's getting more difficult to tell them because the devil has had more time to distract them, to give them other things to think about. And so when you talk about even reaching Africa now, we have, of course, the very remote areas that have never had the gospel yet. We have the big cities that have, in some countries, you know, it's 30 million people in one city.
30
million. And so when you think about trying to reach that city, it's almost impossible doing it door to door or under the standard ways that we think about sharing the gospel.
Right. There's a lot of countries that don't have that many people.
Yes.
Wow.
And even where there's predominantly Christian, they're still so animistic that, you know, we might call them reached, but really they aren't.
So education, nurturing. Because Africa is always is like the traditional mission field of the Western world. It has 12% of the world's population, but it's like when we think of missionaries, we think of Africa. I mean, David Livingstone, way back when, was a missionary. So missionary work has been happening. It should be done by now, right? But
yeah,
I mean, like,
you would think.
So let's take, for instance, Chad. If you went to, I mean, how many villages in Chad are there?
Boy, you know, they really don't even have that information, but from just flying over it, you know, every 3 to 4 miles, you can see another village of up to 5,000 people. Some are a lot smaller than that, you know, 200 or 300. but they're just scattered across the southern part of the country. Of course, people also live up in the north, so you can go for vast distances across the Sahara Desert without seeing any sign of population, and then suddenly you'll have several villages grouped together where they can find water or ways to survive. So it is still somewhat difficult to reach, because when you think of land transport with the political issues, especially in Chad, a French-speaking country of Africa, in general is about 50 years behind the English-speaking countries, just because of their development status and the bureaucracies that exist. So their local infrastructure is very poor, as well as the church work hasn't had a chance to advance.
But now Africa is like the focus of missionary stories for the last 100 years. You must have a lot of missionaries over there really pouring the resources in and putting the elbow grease in to get this done. I mean, you see a lot of missionaries you bump into?
You know, if you look at Africa, it's such a large country. You know, some of the large continents, some of the countries there are the size of the United States east of the Mississippi River.
Wow.
The Congo, for example, where I grew up. And so the coastal areas have generally been reached with the gospel.
Okay.
People came in by ship. They went to the English-speaking countries primarily. And so there you do find, you know, maybe 300,000 or 400,000 Adventists and quite a few other Christians in those countries. You go to a French country with a similar population, similar size, and you'll find anywhere from 200 to 3,000 Adventists in the same population.
Wow.
So there's a huge difference when you go inland off the coast of Africa.
And Chad is inland.
Chad is inland. It's about 600 miles from the nearest port.
And its main language is?
It has two main languages, French and Arabic.
So then how many Adventist missionaries are there in Chad?
In Chad right now we have about 8 couples from overseas, and there's about 12 pastors, local pastors as well.
12 local pastors?
Yes.
For the whole country?
Yes.
And you have how many people in Chad? Live in Chad?
About 12 million.
So one pastor per million, that's not
Roughly.
bad. So there's still a huge challenge.
A huge challenge. You know, when you look at church growth, at even going to new places, Chad is politically divided and ethnically divided. The north is predominantly Arab Muslims, and the south are predominantly the black Christians. And so when you have that difference, anytime you have somebody trying to go across those ethnic lines, there's issues. So when you talk about trying to go into the north, you need somebody that speaks Arabic, you need somebody that's from that area, which is very hard to find. Typically, if a Christian pastor tries to go into one of the northern areas, they're told to get on the bus or whatever transport they came on and turn around and go home because they have no reason being there.
Wow.
And so that's why using the medical aviation is a great way to open the doors to meet with them. And I've spent a lot of time up there with the local people, and they receive you with open arms when they find out that you're there to help them, but also to share in their challenges and difficulties.
Wow. So how do you like living in Africa? Is it something that you prefer? You there because you like it?
But you know, I grew up in Africa, in the Congo, and I wouldn't change that for anything. It was a beautiful place. We've lived in Indonesia, we've lived in Guyana, South America, different places around the world, but Chad, I'd say, is definitely the most challenging place that we've ever lived.
And some days we like it. It's rewarding at times, but a lot of times it's very difficult to be there, that we don't have the availability of food. We say we miss the heat, and we do, but we struggle with the heat when we're there. It's very hot, and there's no reprieve. But, you know, when you know that's where God wants you, then it's okay.
Then it makes it. Now, you say you miss food. What's that mean? Go for days without?
No, I was just saying the availability of a variety of food. Their main diet is, well, they're starting to do more rice, but sorghum and millet, and those are grains, and they're good, but they get old after a while.
After breakfast, lunch, and supper.
Yeah. And as the time goes on, the 5 years we've been there, we're getting more and more fresh things, so that's nice. But
Okay. All right. Is the cost of living pretty high there?
It's actually not too bad if you're just using the local grain. If you try to get imported items, then it is quite high.
How much is a jar of peanut butter?
Well, we actually do have peanuts there, so we grind our own.
Oh.
But if you were to buy it in
And
the
it's
capital,
much better here. I don't think you can buy it.
yeah, I think you can once in a while. It's probably about $8 for a small jar of peanut butter.
Wow. Okay. All right. So you have some pictures here.
Yes,
I'd love to see.
We'll share just a little bit. In fact, Cherise will start by sharing a little bit of what we have here. Can you tell them maybe just a little bit about what you're doing here, Cherise, and what we like to do on Sabbath? You remember this place where we go to Dabgay
Yeah.
in the church, and what do we do there?
Who's that?
Me?
That's you?
And you
who's,
help.
Who's that?
One of our other ones who's helping us.
Uh-huh. And that?
My mom.
Oh.
And what do you do there to help with Sabbath school?
Help sing and help tell stories.
You tell stories? Bible stories? Like
Sometimes my Bible's friends.
Adam and Eve? You tell Adam and Eve?
She likes to use the My Bible Friends and show them the pictures.
Oh. Very cool. Or do you like it? You like to do that?
Yeah.
What, does it give you joy to share? Yeah.
And can you tell them where this is at? What we're doing there?
That's at Gisa, and we do branch Sabbath schools there.
Why are their faces so dirty?
Because they play with stuff that's dirty and
Oh,
stuff.
they don't take a shower?
Sometimes, but not often. They play with mud and stuff, make animals out of it and stuff.
So you can see here it's fairly crowded. The kids pack in fairly tight. It's just a small house with a little lean-to on the side where we're having the branch Sabbath school. And from the outside, actually this is under a tree, I guess.
Well,
you
we
can see
moved
there.
it to under the tree because there wasn't enough room inside the lean-to.
We outgrew, you can see here, even the adults come to watch and see what's happening.
So this is the church.
It's actually a village where we don't have a church yet, so we're just starting out doing planting the gospel and doing branch Sabbath schools in the morning for the kids, and of course the adults always come, and so they start to ask questions, and it's a good way to start out.
So how far from home is this?
This is about 8 kilometers from home,
Okay.
3.5 miles, and we
Past
have.
Stopgate.
It seems like a long ways because the roads are very sandy and it takes a while to get there.
How long does it take to go those 8 miles?
It takes about 15 to 20 minutes on our small motorcycle.
The three of you like to ride on the motorcycle?
Yeah.
Really? Do you get to drive it sometimes?
Sometimes.
Really?
She
When
sits-
mommy's not there.
My mommy's too scared.
She thinks you're gonna fall.
My dad does back wheels with me sometimes.
What does that mean?
A wheelie.
Oh, really? You like that? You
Yeah.
like to go fast?
You weren't supposed to tell everybody that.
Okay, so you guys build this?
Actually, the local people put this up because we were coming and just meeting outside.
Mhm.
And so they took it upon their own initiative to put up a little shack where we could meet.
So they appreciate.
Absolutely.
Stories.
I mean, the kids, they have nothing to do. They play in the daytime when it's hot and dry. They can't go out to their fields. There's nothing that grows at that time of the year.
Uh-huh.
And so they're available doing nothing, basically.
Wow.
And so they're appreciative of some entertainment. And at the same time, they get the gospel.
So is there opportunities for other people to come and tell stories like this in other villages? Maybe?
We're currently working in 4 villages out of about 10,000 villages. So I think the vineyard is right.
There may be some space for.
If you're interested to come, we will make a little shack for you. And you
So
can come.
there's not a crowded. I mean, it's not a crowded situation with too many missionaries.
Absolutely not.
So why would you do that? I mean, why have you left a comfortable place here in America? Or comfortable? I mean, you could get a job flying an airplane.
Sure.
I mean,
I think it's pretty easy if you look at the gospel. I think we've been given our orders early on, and people often ask, well, I don't think that God is calling me to do that. Or, well, I would do that if God called me to do that. But so often I think here, especially in America, people are waiting for God to come to their house and leave a note on their breakfast table saying, thou shalt go to such and such a place and be a missionary. And they forget that that's already happened. God has already been here. He's already given us those orders. And he said, go to all the world. And so some can argue that the world is right here in North America. And that's true. There's still people that need to be reached here with the good news in North America. But there's also vast multitudes outside of North America that need to hear that message still.
Yeah. So what language do those people speak?
Those people will converse a little bit in French, but they also speak a local language called Nangere, that is a dialect spoken in that area.
So how many versions of the Bible do they have in their language?
One, and most of them can't read because they haven't been to school to that level. All the education takes place in French or Arabic, and so when the Bible is developed then in their language, they have to go to some courses actually to know how to read their own language.
So there must be evangelistic series on DVD for them to watch.
That would work really nice if they had electricity or DVDs. Unfortunately, all they have is their little shack and the trees outside.
Wow.
So it really takes one-on-one contact or something like a radio program, because they can receive some radio broadcasts, the few people that have a small shortwave radio. We've also started using the idea of the God Pod, or an MP3 player.
Solar-powered
MP3 player. And there's actually an audio version of the New Testament in their language.
Wow.
And so we've put that on, and we can pass that out, and different people can then gather at homes or in groups.
So you have thousands of those you can pass out, or
we only have about 30 of them so far.
because of what's the limiting factor?
Of course, the cost.
Okay.
Cost is a limiting factor. Also finding ones that will actually last in this environment where you have the heat and the dust and the moisture in the rainy season. So finding some equipment that will actually hold up to that environment.
Okay.
So
what does one of those cost?
We're trying a new style right now that I just got, and we'll be taking back with us about 40 of those, and they're about $80 a piece.
Okay. So
we
you could drop those out of the airplane.
We could.
You got 10,000 villages.
We could also use them all up right now with just people that we know and that can pass them out hand to hand for sure.
That would probably be safer.
Yes. Although we can drop from the air as well. We'll show you some of that here in a little bit. Along with our ministry of reaching out to the local communities, we found a tremendous need for a nutrition center, because many of the children there are malnourished. Worldwide, the World Health Organization says that about every 5 seconds a child under the age of 5 dies due to malnutrition.
Wow.
And so it's a tremendous problem.
So do you actually know families with malnourished children?
It would be hard to find a family who has a child who's not malnourished.
Really?
It's a very high percentage.
Because see, I hear these numbers and I don't know anybody with a malnourished child. I have nobody in my acquaintance
Sure.
that I could go to that I know that their child is malnourished.
Sure.
I just don't run into that.
Yes.
And God says to go to the poor and the hungry. I don't know anybody that's really hungry. But you know some people?
Absolutely. In Chad, it's a very difficult place to live with the malaria, with the lack of food and the malnutrition.
And dirty water.
Dirty water. Their cultural beliefs, the devil has shown them to do different things through their culture. And Wendy can talk more about that in the nutrition center, I think, and how we are trying to help the people in that avenue.
Wow.
That's a pretty severe little girl that came to us. But actually, the picture before is the house of our first malnourished baby. When we first were in Chad, this lady came to us. Actually, he wasn't a baby. He was about 3, I think. And now he's 7 or 8, so he's about 2 years older than Cherise, and she was way he wasn't on the verge of dying, I don't think. The grains that we were talking about earlier, they'll make a thin porridge and drink that, and that keeps them alive, but it doesn't give them all the nutrients that they need.
Right.
And so his mom brought him to us, and we gave her some soybeans and some different things, but then we were gone, and she lives so far away that it was hard to, she was having to carry him, and it was hard to really help her. Finally, I made her stay with a neighbor family and worked with her for a while until he started to get better, and then his little sister also had the same problem and whatever. But this was when we started to finally realize that this is a big problem here. The mother's actually educated. She speaks French. You would think that it would be more of the uneducated people. So at that point, we started working on developing the nutrition center, and then just at the end of June, we finally opened. We have three buildings, and we weren't ready. The buildings weren't finished, but we were just working with babies from our house and trying to get them to come every day, and it was too difficult. So we finally opened and worked for 2 months before we had to leave. And we had, I think, 33 babies that were hospitalized over that time period.
33.
And so this was one of them. But they just come to you, and they're so lifeless. I mean, they just sit there. You can't get them to smile, and often you can't even get them to eat. It's really a struggle. This little girl, you can change the picture there, Gary. We actually had to feed her through a tube in her nose because she didn't have the energy to even eat. They don't have the energy to keep their body temperature up, so they're cold even though it's 110 degrees outside. It's just really sad to see, and unfortunately this little girl didn't make it. She came too late. But the next...
She passed away?
Yes. The next little girl, you can tell she's not quite as severe as the other one, though she's quite skinny. The reddish hair and the big belly are all signs of malnutrition. When she came to us, we called her the lonely child because she would just be sitting somewhere by herself doing nothing. And she loved it when we would pick her up and carry her around. And in fact, I had been working with her baby brother, giving him formula because the mother wasn't able to breastfeed. And one day the father brought this little girl to me, and I was like, what on earth? Why have you not told me this before, you know? So she came and stayed, and also her older brother as well. And keep going, Gary. She was there almost 6 kilos, I guess, when she came. And then the next picture shows her when she left. I mean, you can't even tell that it's the same child. And this is maybe 3 weeks later, I think.
So how old was she when she was weighed? 6 kilos?
I believe she was 2.
2 years old, and she
At
weighed
6
13
kilos,
pounds.
yeah, 13 pounds. And now, one thing that they do, and this is getting me on my soapbox, but when the baby is born, they will not breastfeed for the first 2 or 3 days. They believe that the colostrum is bad, it's just watery, whatever, and they feed them dirty water.
You're kidding.
And then they'll give them water throughout the time. So we're on a big kick now. Also, there's a OBGYN at the hospital. Don't give your baby water until they're 6 months old.
So a lot of the malnutrition issues are educational.
Definitely. Mostly educational.
Wow.
So we have babies now that are doing that, moms that are doing this, not giving the baby water until 6 months, and they're coming in bigger than my 2- and 3-year-olds.
Wow.
So that's really amazing.
Yeah. So what do we need to do to get this information out to everyone?
I don't really know what the solution is, except getting them to try it.
Right.
And then once their neighbors and friends see that it actually works, then more
It'll
people
go word
will
of
try
mouth.
it. Because at first they just laugh at us and say, oh, that's fine for you. It's not as hot where you guys live, you know, whatever. They don't believe us. But when they see it, now I think that they'll start.
Starting to catch on. Praise the Lord.
This lady, actually girl still, she was 19, or she is 19. Her name is Merci, which means thank you. She came to the hospital. She was pregnant and had a horrible delivery. The baby died, and she lost a lot of blood. And she went home pretty weak and apparently had nobody to take care of her. And she came back like a month later and she was almost dead from malnutrition, and she was so skinny and weak. And they sent her to us. They normally I deal with children, and they said, will you take this girl? And I said, if she's malnourished, I'll take her, I'll try, you know. So we really struggled with her. She was difficult at first. She didn't want to cooperate, and she got malaria, so we sent her back to the hospital, and I was just about ready to pull my hair out with this girl, but it was just like suddenly she changed, and it's just amazing to see them when they change. It's really cool.
So this is why you're there.
One of the things is like I mentioned, the cultural aspects of somebody like this, for example. We don't know exactly, but oftentimes people will say that they had a curse put on them. The witch doctor will put a curse on them, and so when they hear that, then they just give up hope. They have nothing to live for.
Wow.
And that's what it seemed like with this lady. She didn't want to eat. She didn't want to cooperate. But suddenly, one day, like Wendy said, she switched around and she went home healthy and happy.
So when we think of the mission field and we look at the statistics, to us they're numbers. But to you, they have names, faces. And has that inspired your growth spiritually in your family and your walk with Christ?
It definitely does. But it will definitely challenge you tremendously as well.
Right.
Because when you see death virtually every day, when somebody dies, people gather around their home for several days, and it's uncommon to not know of some place where somebody has died recently. And virtually everybody that we know has lost somebody in their family within the last year or two.
Wow.
And so when you see that day in and day out, it can be very challenging to even stay there.
Right.
But you just have to remember that you're there to share Christ.
Right.
So even if they do die, or if people in their family die, they can still have that hope that we have, that Jesus is coming back.
Right. Thank you for sharing with us a little part of your heart that's in Africa. And thank you for joining us on this episode of the Mission TV show. God bless, and we'll see you next time.